Hi everyone, my name is Nick, and today we're going to talk about plants that are impossible to kill. Disclaimer, right off the bat, these plants are 100% possible to kill if you overwater them or if you do not give them the right lighting requirements. All of these plants fall into the underwatering side of the spectrum, so they're for neglectful plant parents, people who travel, anything along those lines. If you do not pay that much attention to watering your plants, these plants are for you. And they're impossible to kill, I swear. So some of them fall on the bright light end of the spectrum, some of them fall on the low light end of the spectrum. So let's start off talking about the ones that prefer bright light. And the first one I want to talk about today is Epiphyllum. So I think these are commonly, well, this variety is commonly referred to as an orchid cactus, and this one in particular is an Epiphyllum Acrimania. And these are really impossible to kill, as all of these plants are. But you see these all over the place at any like mom and pop store here in Philadelphia, I see, not everyone, but many of them, I do see an epiphyllum usually growing in their window among other plants, but usually I just see a nice chunky epiphyllum growing. And there's good reason why these people have these plants, and it's because they're impossible to kill. So they could be watered a little bit every day, I'm sure. Don't do that because they could rot, but really I water mine like every 10 days plus, and I've never had an issue. In fact, there's another similar one to this that I have hanging up in my home in a much larger pot for sure, but I can't even tell you the last time I watered that plant, like straight up probably in 2019. Definitely have not watered it this year. I should, now that I'm talking about it, but that thing looks fine, and it will be fine when I water it too. It'll probably be even better than it is now, but yeah, they're really impossible to kill plants, can really withstand neglect. They do have little spines on the leaves, or whatever you want to call these. I forget the exact name that these flattened straps of a leaf would be referred to as, but they bloom. They do have really nice large blooms, some of them at least. Some of the other types of epiphyllums that are out there are more so grown for their foliage. So there is another one that I wanted to spotlight today that is more grown for its foliage, the interesting shape of its foliage, and that is this Epiphyllum. Oh, I don't even remember the name of this one, but they call it a rickrack cactus, and it's got these funky little zigzag leaves, or sometimes they call it zigzag cactus. It depends. Maybe there's different varieties. But both of these, actually, this and the Epiphyllum Acrimania, were gifted me as just cuttings. So this was just one little piece when someone gave me a cutting of this, and it's since grown off all these little other pieces in just the last couple of months. So they are rather fast growers. But this one was gifted to me from one of my YouTube subscribers about 2 years ago at this point, and I believe she gave me 3 or 4 pieces, and I just shoved them in this pot and I stuck it up in the window. And I'm not even kidding when I say this is the first time I've pulled this pot out of the window, if you can't tell by like the small amounts of cobwebs and just like pieces of like vines that have just like, or like tendrils that I've grabbed on from plants past. But this thing has just exploded into a nice mother plant at this point. So I'm very happy. I should really give it a nice dusting while I have it off of the hook. But yeah, it's really nice to actually see how large this plant has gotten. If I didn't film this video today, I don't think I would have really ever pulled it down. Anyway, the care. Let's talk about the care. So these do require bright light. They require really bright light. I grow both of these in south-facing windows. Or actually, I think that one, the Acrimania, is in the west-facing window, but I only have west and south-facing windows in my home. So my plants do receive rather bright light if they are hanging out inside of a window, as both of these are. And I think that's the secret to these. They really do like to be practically fried in a window. So put your epiphyllums as close to a window as possible. Maybe not necessarily have to have them in the window, but very close to the window would be best. And do not overwater them. This one, I'm very forgetful with. I probably water it like every 2 or 3 weeks, while the other epiphyllum is more at my eye level, so I get to water it a little bit more often. But this one, as you can kind of see from these leaves back here, they're a little shriveled up, and I can tell that this one could really use a nice watering once I'm done filming this video. So let me just carefully put this guy down. Another reason I wanted to talk about these ones first is because I was a little nervous about juggling this rickrack cactus. But I want to talk about another jungle cacti for my second pick for today, and that's Rhipsalis. So this one right here, I believe, is a Ripsalus Becifura. I think it's some cultivar or variety of that species. I really wanted to pull down my Ripsalis pilocarpa for this video today, but my Senecio macroglossus, or my wax ivy, has completely entangled itself in the macrame hanger that it's growing on. So we're stuck with this Ripsalis Becifura today, but that's not really a downgrade because this plant's just absolutely fantastic with its just green spaghetti look. But very similar to the other jungle cacti, the Epiphyllums I share with you guys, these guys are very, very low maintenance. I would consider them impossible to kill as long as you not overwater them. The added bonus about these Rhipsalis, I would say, is that they require a little bit less light than the Epiphyllums do. So you can tell that this is less thick foliage, as the Epiphyllums have more strappier leaves, so they probably required more light to hold up that thick, juicy foliage. These little thin leaves that my Rhipsalis have, and most of my Rhipsalis are quite thin, they do not require as much light. They can really withstand small amounts of water. Of course, if I'm very forgetful with this one, if you look very close inside the pot, you will see some brown, dried up bits and pieces from me being a little too forgetful. But when my Rhipsalis are in need of water, they just kind of shrivel up a little bit, very similar to the Epiphyllum, the Rick Rat cactus that I just shared with you guys. But they do have very nice telltale signs. Of course, if you give these a little bit more light, I'm sure they might grow a little bit faster, but I just have mine pulled off maybe 2 feet from my bright windows in my home, and they seem to do fantastic. And some of my other Rhipsalis I even have pulled off even further. Of course, they do grow much slower, but I've never had an issue with them. I just make sure to really not water them until the soil is bone dry. But really, really easy plants. I don't think I've really killed a Rhipsalis yet, so I would say that they're really impossible to kill. Another one that requires bright light is Kalanchoe. This one I think is a perfect option for this video because I believe Kalanchoes are really just like weeds in their natural habitats because they're impossible to kill. So I wanted to talk about this one today, but I feel like this is kind of a bad example. But this is a panda plant, or a Kalanchoe tomentosa, and this is my favorite Kalanchoe, which is why I wanted to talk about it, because it's just super fuzzy and blue and like just a very, very striking plant. And I can get a little close. I'm sure you're going to see some dust and some cat hair on this plant, but you can see where they have these little like paw or fingers that kind of looks like these little brown spots. And on other Kalanchoes that I have in my home or that grow in general, they produce these little baby plants that are just offsets of the plant, and that's how they propagate itself, and they will just fall into the soil and they will regrow itself. So another type of Kalanchoe is commonly called mother of thousands for that reason. And I should have grabbed an example for this video, but unfortunately I didn't. Of course, I have the magic of extra footage that I can put in to show you guys. But I actually just found a mother of thousands growing in my aloe plant that I've had for many years. The Kalanchoe is taller than the aloe plant. I don't even know how that happened. I didn't even know it was there. So I'm gonna have to go in there and yank it out soon. And because of the way it grows, I'm sure if I look in the general vicinity of the pots around that that aloe, and the Kalanchoe at this point because it's taken over its space, but I will find baby plants growing in the other pots. So if I'm correct, I will include some footage of that. But this one is also very easy, impossible to kill. Of course, we had a little accident earlier this year with a pot falling on it, so that's why it's looking a little bit bald compared to when you last may have seen it. But I've just taken all of those leaves and just placed them back into the soil because they just root up very easily. If you just literally lay them on top of the soil, you don't have to put them in the soil or anything, and they will just root up these little baby plants, and you just let them go. They will just root themselves into the soil and go. In fact, I believe I just found this literally just growing on my windowsill. Like it was just sitting next to the pot on the windowsill, and it's completely rooted up and is just starting to grow a baby plant. So I'm just gonna nestle it back into the soil and it can grow a wonderful new plant. Kalanchoe do require a bright amount of light. If you do not give this plant bright light, I would not be surprised if it rots or if the leaves come in just a little less big and beautiful and juicy. But really impossible to kill, specifically if you have a bright window. This plant, make sure you pick one that you like because it's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. So really truly tough as nails. And one more I want to talk about today that does require some bright light is Sansevieria. And I wanted to be a little specific today and talk about Sansevieria cylindrica, so the circular types of Sansevieria. I just find that the strappier leaf Sansevierias, the trifasciatas, they can be not as forgiving when it comes to underwatering or overwatering. These ones seem to be a little bit better. And on top of that, the trifasciatas, they can suffer from this disease where they get this brown spot on the leaf. And while I'm sure it exists in Sansevieria cylindrica, I have not had the issue with them in my experience. So do not quote me on that. That is probably not correct, but I have personally never had the issue of that disease with my Sansevieria cylindricas, just my trifasciatas, if that means anything to any of you. But this one in particular they call the starfish Sansevieria, and it's Sansevieria cylindrica bancal, and it is really a plant that is impossible to kill. I've had this one for probably 2.5 years now because I think, or not, oh my gosh, I have no idea how long I've had this plant. I got it right when I started working at Urban Jungle. So 2 years, okay. We sorted it out, but this one was just this one plant, and it's put off these little baby offsets, so similar to like how an aloe plant would grow. It just makes these little babies, and I could separate them if I wanted to give them to friends. Now this plant could definitely withstand lower light. I would just find that these thick fingers, if you will, would come in a little less thick. They might be the size of my pinky instead of my thumb, and I want to give this plant bright light so it can grow to its fullest potential. So definitely could withstand lower light, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I think that's what the Sansevieria trifasciatas are a little bit better served for. But this one's great for a bright windowsill. I don't have to think about watering it that often. I probably water it like every 10 to 14 days. If I go a little too far without watering it, the leaves will kind of shrivel up a little bit. They do have these creases, and they will kind of like shrivel in on themselves. But that's something that's easily fixed with just some adamant watering, not overwatering, but just regular waterings. The plant will easily plump itself back up. So all of these fun little Sansevierias that have these like thicker leaves, so like the Sansevieria cylindrica, the Sansevieria bancal, the Sansevieria fernwood, I find all of these to be really excellent options for your bright windowsills, and you really don't have to think about them that often at all. So moving over into the lower light end of the spectrum for this video, I want to talk about one that I think everyone's probably expecting to be on this list if you're familiar with houseplants, so I might as well get it out of the way. Sorry for taking so long to even talk about it, but this is a ZZ plant, or a Zamioculcas zamiifolia, and this is like the plant that is just like known for being impossible to kill. Once again, it's totally possible to kill this plant if you overwater it, but what I always say about this plant when I'm selling them at the plant shop where I work is, if you water this plant more than you pay your rent, it's too much. Now, you could totally water this plant like every 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm sure it would be okay. You could give this plant a very, very, very well-draining mixture, and then you could probably water it like every couple of days to once a week. But in our homes, what we typically are doing is just using a plain potting soil, and if you're being a good plant parent, you add a little bit of perlite or some orchid bark in there, and you really try to amend it. But that's still going to be pretty heavy for the ZZ plant, which has very, very thick roots, and it also has these little potato-like structures that are inside the soil, and that's where they store all of their water. So that's why you don't want to overwater them, because as well as having these very thick stems, fronds, I don't know the word, but they have these very thick bulbous root systems below the soil that will rot very, very easily upon overwatering. So you do really want to be mindful with this plant. But this is the one plant that I would say, if anyone comes to me in the plant store where I work and they're like, I have a basement that I want to put a plant in, or I have a bathroom with no windows, or I have an office at work that has no windows, this is the one where I wholeheartedly can recommend that they can grow this plant. And it will actually grow. It might not grow to be the most incredible beast of a plant. It might be a little wimpy over time, but it's still going to grow, and you're not going to kill it, as long as you don't water it more than you pay your rent. So you could put this plant in a closet. You could literally put this plant in the closet and just forget about it. And I'm sure you could come back a month or 2 later and it would probably look exactly the same. And that's the magic of the ZZ plant. And that's why everybody should have a ZZ plant. I put these in the darkest corners of my home. I have one on a high shelf. This is where this one lives. I have one on top of my refrigerator. I have one on top of a bookcase. It's just like the plant that I throw in the darkest corners if I just need a little bit of greenery, but I don't necessarily want to risk putting another plant there. And one thing actually cool about this ZZ plant is it's got a variegated stem, which is very cool. The whole petiole, I don't know, frond, I don't know the word for this, stem, is variegated as well, but I think it's kind of a fluke, for lack of a better term, because all the other stems it has since grown off of the same tuber are not variegated, so boo-hoo, sad, but whatever. But moving on to another type of plant for low light is Aglaonema, or Chinese evergreen. But I want to say first, before I get into it, is that I don't swear by Aglaonemas. I think that some of them can be a little difficult to grow in the home. I find I bring them home and some of the lower leaves turn yellow and they fall off, or maybe 2 of the plants out of the 5 in the pot might just like rot away. And it's a little disheartening and frustrating for a plant that's so highly spoken of. But there is one type of Aglaonema that I grow in my home. I think it's a variant or a cultivar or a hybrid. I'm not too sure on the exact of the specificity of it all, but there's one I grow in my home that not only looks fake, but I don't think a single leaf has ever yellowed on this plant. I've had it for, I would say, about a year, if not over a year at this point. So I feel like I can wholeheartedly recommend it to you guys as a plant that's impossible to kill. But it's this Aglaonema, I think it's spring snow. And this thing looks fake. Does it not look fake? Oh my gosh. The only thing that I can prove to you that it's real is from how the leaves are kind of curling below from my neglect, my underwatering. But it really does look like I just went to my local craft store and just found a fake plant in their fake plant section and just put it in a pot. It really does look like that. I had this growing in my vertical garden for some time, but I actually took down my vertical garden because I wanted to make room for some other art in my home. But I just have since potted it up in this pot. It's been living in this pot for a number of months now and has done nothing but grow. I feel like I'm so used to my Aglaonemas or my Chinese evergreens having these lower leaves turn yellow and fall off very quickly if it's just has just a drop of unhappiness in it. But this thing is great. And once again, I put this in one of the darkest corners of my home. It's sitting on my bar cart, on the furthest edge of the bar cart, away from the grow light, away from the window. So it's got to be at least 12 feet away from the closest window. So really is not getting any light at all, yet it still has the audacity to look completely fake and unreal. So I have to recommend Aglaonema Spring Snow to you guys. I probably water this plant maybe every 10 to 14 days, maybe even pushing beyond that. I'm very, very forgetful with it, but this is a plant where I know I could forget about this plant for weeks on end and it would be fine. At this point, I feel very, very comfortable with this plant, so highly recommend. Okay, so I think I have one more to share with you guys today, and this is, of course, a rather large one. Oh, and it's rather dusty too, but this is a Dracaena Janet Craig, and I really want to be specific today talking about Dracaena Janet Craig because this is a type of Dracaena that has a very fleshy stem, as you can see from this green fleshy stem right here. So there's a lot of more common Dracaenas, like the Dracaena fragrans, which is the corn plant, or the Dracaena marginata, which is the dragon tree, and they have woody stems. And are they difficult plants to grow? No, but I find that I have less success with them because I don't know what it has to do with those woody stems, but maybe it's something to do with the root systems, but they can just really hollow out and just fall apart if they're underwatered too much, or if they're overwatered, they rot so easily. But I've never had that issue with this Dracaena Janet Craig. It's very similar to the Lucky Bamboo, which is a Dracaena, not bamboo, unfortunately, if I just crushed a couple dreams out there. But this Dracaena Janet Craig, this is one that if anybody comes to me and they're looking for a large plant for their dark home or their dark business or whatever they have, I always say Dracaena Janet Craig. If you're worried about spending money on a large plant and you're worried about killing it, get a Dracaena Janet Craig. There is so much to love about this plant, and I know it's not the most exciting plant out there, but there's so much to love about it. I know I just have these 2 little canes in the pot. Typically you'll have 3 to 5 canes in the pot. This is actually when I rescued from work because the largest cane in the pot got some pretty bad frost damage. It's what happens when you get plants trucked in January sometimes. So this might not be the most attractive Dracaena Janet Craig out there, specifically because it's literally covered in dust. But this one lives behind my television in my bedroom, so that's 1, why it's covered in dust, and 2, why it's still in its plastic pot, because I don't physically see the pot that it's planted in. It just gives me a little life behind my television so I can decide if I want to watch my plant or the TV if I'm in my bedroom. And once again, it's also why it's literally just riddled with dust right now. I really have to give this plant a good cleaning and also a watering, because I cannot tell you the last time I watered this plant. Once again, I would not be lying if I say I probably haven't watered this plant this year, and I can tell from how this stem is getting kind of shriveled, it could really use a good drink. So I'm gonna throw this plant in my shower when I'm done filming this video and just give it a really good clean, a really good water, and then I probably will not have to worry about it again till the late fall or early winter. That's very neglectful of me. I probably should be paying a little bit more attention to this plant, but I'm just letting you guys know how truly tough as nails, impossible to kill this Dracaena janicrega is. Highly, highly recommend. This is the one, as well as the ZZ plant, I would say, if you're looking for a large plant for your home and you do not want to kill it, these are what you want. So I would love to hear your options as well for plants that are impossible to kill, because I'm sure there are more out there. These are just the ones that I'm speaking from my own experience. So just to recap, it was Epiphyllum, Ripsalis, Sansevieria, Kalanchoe, Zamioculcas, Aglaonema, and Dracaena, specifically the fleshy Dracaenas. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Philly Foliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.